Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is David, and I am 32 years old. I want to share the story of how my marriage came to an end. I was married to Linda, who was 5 years younger than me. I loved her deeply, perhaps too much, and allowed her to live her life on her terms, until she crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. Linda committed an unforgivable act, something I couldn't accept under any circumstances. Though it was a painful decision, I felt it was necessary to ensure she never repeated such behavior. Cheating is unacceptable in any relationship, and despite the heartbreak it caused, I knew I had to take a stand. When I caught her lying and cheating, I resolved to make her face the consequences of her actions. I met Linda 9 months ago at a party hosted by a friend. The moment I saw her, I was captivated by her beauty and felt compelled to get to know her. I asked my friend to introduce us, and once we started talking, the conversation flowed effortlessly. Linda was outgoing and confident, sharing how she loved going to parties and living life on her own terms. She was bold, ready to take on any challenge. The more we talked, the more drawn I felt to her. Not only was she stunning, but she was also clear about what she wanted from life. I knew I wanted to see her again and spend more time getting to know her. We began meeting regularly, and it didn't take long for me to realize I couldn't stop thinking about her. She made me feel things I had never felt before. Some friends warned me about her wild nature and history of frequently changing boyfriends, but I chose to ignore them. I trusted my instincts and believed that she felt the same way about me. After just 6 months of knowing her, I was certain she was the one I wanted to marry. To make my intentions clear, I planned a romantic getaway to a private island. Linda was impressed by the elaborate preparations I had arranged just for her. One evening, as we enjoyed drinks at sunset, I decided it was the perfect moment to propose. With my heart racing, I popped the question. Linda's eyes lit up, and she instantly said yes. She hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face, and told me it was the best day of her life. Our wedding was nothing short of a royal affair, making us the talk of the town for nearly a month. Everywhere we went, people spoke about our grand celebration. The media coverage was overwhelming, with news outlets and social media buzzing about our fairy tale romance. It seemed like the world was captivated by our love story, and even strangers would stop us to share their congratulations and well wishes. The outpouring of love and support made us feel incredibly blessed and grateful. On our wedding day, Linda and I made an unconventional decision to maintain separate rooms for our belongings. While we shared a bed at night, we agreed to continue living our lives much as we had before marriage. We both acknowledged that we had married quickly and hadn't spent much time getting to know each other beforehand. This mutual decision gave us the space to find a natural rhythm in our relationship. We believed that maintaining our individuality and personal interests was essential for a strong and lasting bond. By giving each other space and time to pursue our hobbies and goals, we thought it would allow us to grow both as individuals and as a couple. We rarely interfered with each other's schedules or kept tabs on one another. I was often preoccupied with my business and appreciated the simplicity of our arrangement, trusting Linda to take care of herself and communicate if she needed anything. This mutual trust and independence created a healthy balance in our relationship, fostering a sense of freedom and autonomy. It also deepened our respect and admiration for each other, laying the foundation for what we believed would be a strong partnership. We believed that by prioritizing our own well-being, we were ultimately strengthening the foundation of our marriage. Linda wanted to celebrate our marriage with her closest friends, so I arranged a 5-day cruise for her and her 5 best friends. I didn't feel the need to join them, as my presence might make them feel awkward. I had no hesitation in fulfilling any of Linda's wishes, as long as I could afford them, because her happiness meant the world to me. I trusted that giving her the freedom to enjoy this special time with her friends would make the experience even more memorable. I was confident she would have a wonderful time creating lasting memories. After our marriage, Linda continued living much as she had before, going to parties, coming home late, and sometimes stumbling into bed completely drunk. One evening, I sat her down to talk about her behavior. I gently asked if something was bothering her, or if there was a reason she was struggling to adjust. She admitted that everything about this new life was overwhelming for her. Linda explained that she hadn't grown up with the privileges I had, and stepping into the role of a wealthy man's wife felt like an entirely different world. I tried to understand her perspective and decided to give her more time to adapt. After all, I wanted her to feel completely at home in this new chapter of our lives. However, 3 months into our marriage, things still hadn't changed. Linda maintained her separate room, though she often expressed her love for me, and we shared passionate moments together. Despite the physical intimacy, there was an emotional distance between us that I couldn't ignore. I began to wonder if deeper issues were causing Linda to keep her guard up and maintain this sense of separation. I wanted her to trust me fully and feel at ease in our home, where she truly belonged. I started contemplating whether I should have a candid conversation with her about my concerns and unhappiness. Would she understand my perspective and work with me to bridge the gap? I decided to give it another week before approaching her for an open and honest heart-to-heart. I believe this would be the best way to address my concerns without causing unnecessary hurt. One day, I came home early to retrieve some papers for an upcoming meeting. As I entered the house, I noticed Linda wasn't home, likely out with her friends. I was about to grab my papers from my room and leave when curiosity got the better of me. I decided to take a look at Linda's room, hoping to find something that might help me understand her better. As I searched through her things, I came across one of her lipsticks, which accidentally fell to the floor. Bending down to pick it up, I noticed a piece of paper tucked under the dresser. It seemed important, so I carefully pulled it out. It was an invitation to a private party. Curious, I opened it to read the details. The party was being held in Linda's honor and was organized by a group of men. What struck me most was the note at the bottom of the invite. To the most beautiful woman ever, who deserves the love of every man in the world. The venue listed was a private villa owned by one of my business competitors. Suspicious, I decided to see for myself what this party was all about. On my way there, I called Linda to check where she was. She casually told me she was at a sleepover with a friend and wouldn't be back until the following evening. I had no reason to doubt her. I'd always given her the freedom to do as she pleased, and I trusted her implicitly. Yet, the circumstances around this party didn't sit right with me. Determined to uncover the truth, I drove to the villa. When I arrived, I parked outside and took a moment to observe. The gate was unattended, so I let myself in. As I walked down the path, the loud, cheerful music grew deafening. Cars lined the driveway, and as I neared the entrance, I spotted Linda's car parked among them. My heart sank. She was at the party, not at her friend's house as she had claimed. Instead of knocking on the door, I decided to investigate discreetly. I walked along the villa's exterior, searching for a window I could look through to see what was happening inside. I continued walking along the villa and spotted a window with its blinds open. Carefully, I approached, ensuring I remained hidden. Peering inside, I saw a group of men standing around, drinks in hand, laughing loudly. The music blared, drowning out their voices, making it impossible to discern what they were saying. As I observed, I noticed something unsettling. The men were scantily dressed, with many bare-chested and some in just their underwear. They were all fixated on something below their line of sight, something I couldn't see from my position. Confused and uneasy, I couldn't fathom what Linda could possibly be doing at such a gathering. Just as I was about to give up and ring the doorbell, something caught my attention. Rising from the ground was Linda, standing in the center of the group, wearing nothing but her panties, her hands provocatively covering her chest. My heart froze. I felt a wave of numbness wash over me, unable to process what I was witnessing. Before I could convince myself that I had misunderstood the situation, one of the men approached Linda and kissed her. She looked around, laughed, and the rest of the men began cheering and hooting. Rage and despair boiled within me. My instinct was to storm inside and take Linda away, but as I marched toward the door, a thought stopped me. Realizing the stakes, I returned to the window and began making note of everyone present. There were 6 men in total, all of them my business competitors, along with Linda. The sheer betrayal burned inside me, but I knew that acting impulsively could ruin me. I couldn't afford to let these men mock me or use this situation against me. Clenching my fists, I decided not to intervene at that moment. Instead, I resolved to plan my next steps carefully, ensuring that both Linda and the men would face the consequences of their actions. With a heavy heart and my mind swirling with anger and frustration, I walked away from the villa, got into my car, and drove off like a man possessed. The images of what I had seen were seared into my mind, and I knew I couldn't let this go without a reckoning. I had given Linda everything she ever wanted and more. I was attentive, generous, and passionate in our relationship. Our intimate life was vibrant, filled with wild and exciting moments, both day and night. Despite all this, she had chosen to betray me in such an extreme and degrading way. Trying to rationalize Linda's behavior felt futile. It wouldn't change what had happened. Instead, my thoughts turned to how I could make her and those men pay for what they had done. Consumed by anger and a sense of betrayal, I became fixated on revenge. I vowed to teach them all a lesson they wouldn't forget and to reclaim my dignity. The next evening, Linda came home as if nothing had happened. just as she'd told me she would. I was waiting for her, curious to see how she would behave after such a monumental betrayal. To my astonishment, she was calm and composed, as though she had nothing to hide. Her demeanor made my blood boil, but I kept my emotions in check, playing along with her act. I casually asked how the sleepover went. She smiled and said it was fun, mentioning that she had caught up with her friends. I let her believe I was none the wiser, waiting patiently for the right moment to put my plan into action. After she freshened up and joined me in the living room, I brought up my upcoming 2-week business trip. I mentioned that I had hired a personal secretary to assist me during the trip and that her name was Betty. I then called Betty into the room to introduce her to Linda. She greeted Linda warmly, and Linda responded politely, though I could see a flicker of unease in her expression. I told Linda she should rest, as I needed to go over some details with Betty. Linda agreed, mentioning that she was tired, understandable, considering her activities the previous night. Her calm facade began to crack slightly when I placed my hand on Betty's lower back, ensuring Linda noticed the gesture. Her uneasiness grew, but she said nothing. I spent about an hour with Betty, outlining her role. She wasn't hired for actual work, but as a tool to unsettle Linda. My goal was to plant seeds of doubt in her mind, making her question my relationship with Betty. I wanted her to feel the sting of jealousy and guilt, hoping it would drive her to confess her wild and shameful actions. This was just the beginning of my plan to make her confront the truth and face the consequences of her betrayal. The next morning, Betty walked into our bedroom to wake me up, ensuring we wouldn't be late for our meeting. Linda was visibly shocked to see that Betty had access to our bedroom as well. Without giving her time to ask questions, I quickly got ready and told her I'd see her in 2 weeks. Betty and I left together, and for the next 2 weeks, I planned to stay at a hotel while keeping a close eye on Linda and her activities. During this time, I also needed to dig deeper into the identities of the 6 men who had been at that party. My goal was to gather solid evidence of their actions and relationships, ensuring I had every base covered when the time came to act. I hired a private investigator to compile comprehensive reports on these men, detailing their personal and professional lives. Meanwhile, I decided to personally monitor Linda, as I needed to see firsthand what she would do while I was away. True to my suspicions, Linda left the house around noon. I discreetly followed her car, knowing she wouldn't risk inviting any of her lovers to our home. She eventually parked at a hotel, where she met Richard Brown, my biggest business competitor. As they had lunch, I watched them laughing and smiling together. Brown's hand repeatedly found its way to Linda's thigh, and she made no effort to stop him. After lunch, Brown led her to his car and drove to his villa. Knowing exactly what they would be doing there, I decided not to waste any more time following them. Instead, I focused on leveraging the information my private investigator had gathered. Among the details was contact information for Richard Brown's fiancée. I found a phone booth and called her, introducing myself as someone helping Richard with a surprise he had planned for her. I provided her with the address of his villa, carefully crafting the story to sound convincing. 40 minutes later, she arrived, driving straight inside. I had already bribed the villa's security guards to let her in without any issue. The villa's main door was left unlocked, as Richard and Linda likely saw no reason to secure it. Richard's fiancée walked inside, expecting a romantic surprise, but was instead greeted with a shocking scene. She found Richard entangled with an unfamiliar woman in a compromising position. Her scream echoed through the villa as she yanked off her engagement ring and hurled it at his face before storming out in a fury. Richard chased after her, desperately claiming she had misunderstood the situation, but she wasn't buying it. She declared not only the end of their engagement, but also her intention to withdraw all her investments from his business. From the comfort of my car, I watched the drama unfold with satisfaction, mentally noting, 1 down, 5 to go. Using the same method, I gathered incriminating evidence on the other men. I ensured their infidelities were exposed, either to their spouses or business associates, leading to broken relationships, hefty alimony payments, or the loss of significant investments. My plan was working like a charm, but I had saved the best surprise for Linda. I orchestrated an elaborate setup by sending invitations to all the men on Linda's behalf, inviting them to a celebratory party at a luxurious villa. Similarly, I sent an invitation to Linda from the men, praising her for being the only woman who understood and supported them. This bonding celebration was designed to gather them all in one place for the grand finale. The villa was prepped with hidden cameras in every room, including the bathrooms, ensuring no moment of the night would go unnoticed. On the evening of the party, I made sure everyone arriving had to deposit their phones at the entrance, cutting them off from the outside world. Linda entered, dressed provocatively in a red backless dress I had gifted her, seemingly oblivious to the irony of wearing it for a night of infidelity. As the party got underway, the group indulged in music, drinks, dancing, and eventually, intimate behavior. Meanwhile, I activated a live stream of the event, broadcasting it to every television screen in the companies where the men worked, including my own. The reactions were swift. Calls began flooding their confiscated phones as managers, families, and friends reached out in outrage over what was being aired. Sitting in the villa's monitoring room, surrounded by their muted phones, I savored every moment with a bucket of popcorn, watching as their night of fun unraveled into chaos. During the 2 weeks I spent following Linda, one thing became painfully clear. She never loved me. She was with me for the wealth and privileges that came with being my wife. I should have known better than to fall for someone like her, a gold digger through and through. To some extent, I could have tolerated her attraction to my money. After all, such things aren't uncommon. What I couldn't tolerate was her deceit. She pretended to be a loyal wife while carrying on affairs, not just with anyone, but with men I regularly dealt with in business. The smug looks on their faces when they spoke to me about deals were unbearable. They knew, in their hearts, they were sharing intimate moments with my wife while I remained oblivious. That humiliation was something I couldn't forgive. I knew exposing Linda and these men wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message. Messing with me was a mistake they'd regret. After collecting all the footage from the party, I left the villa. I sent Linda a message letting her know I'd be arriving home the next day. The cameras continued recording as the guests woke up, some leaving early. Linda was the last to leave, hastily gathering herself after reading my message and heading home to prepare for my return. I gave her ample time to freshen up and compose herself before I made my entrance, accompanied by Betty. Upon seeing Linda, I hugged her briefly but immediately turned my attention to Betty, engaging her in conversation as though Linda wasn't even in the room. I completely ignored her presence. Linda stood there for a moment, visibly confused and agitated by my indifference. When she realized she wasn't going to get a reaction from me, she stomped her foot in frustration and stormed off. Watching her unravel confirmed that my plan for revenge was working perfectly. It's been 2 days since I returned from my business trip, and I've continued avoiding Linda as much as possible. The tension in the air grows heavier by the day, but I'm content knowing that the wheels of justice, or perhaps karma, are well in motion. I was well aware that all of Linda's lovers were tied up with court cases and defamation suits, leaving them unable to contact her anytime soon. Unbeknownst to her, I had blocked all their numbers from her contacts, ensuring she remained in the dark about the footage and the chaos it had unleashed. As the days passed, I made sure Linda felt increasingly unwelcome in her own home. Betty was now in charge of everything, from instructing the cook on meal preparations to deciding the new diet plan I would follow. Whenever Linda tried to intervene or correct her, Betty would flash a sweet smile and say, "He's changed his preferences now," before giving Linda a pointed, snarky look. Frustrated, Linda came to me, complaining about Betty's overreach and unnecessary involvement in household rituals. I brushed off her concerns, telling her she was overreacting. I made it clear that Betty was far better at managing things and was doing an excellent job. Linda, however, couldn't hide her growing frustration, convinced that Betty's presence was both intrusive and deliberate. I was carefully setting the stage for Linda to accuse me of cheating so I could turn the tables on her. The next day, I told her I'd arranged for her to spend time with her friends. I had booked a club for her and suggested she go out, relax, and lift her spirits. I explained that I'd be working late, so it was the perfect opportunity for her to enjoy a night out. What Linda didn't know was that I had someone tailing her, providing me with hourly updates on her whereabouts. Trusting her was out of the question. I needed her out of the house to finalize the preparations for the grand reveal I had meticulously planned for the night. By the time she returned, everything would be in place. Linda stumbled home around midnight, visibly drunk. As she entered the living room, she froze, seeing me seated on the couch with Betty perched on my lap. Her disoriented mind struggled to process the scene. Staggering toward us, she screamed, "What the hell is going on?" I looked at her calmly, a smile playing on my lips, and said, "Why don't you join us?" Her face twisted in disgust as she demanded Betty get off my lap. Betty shifted slightly, as if to comply, but I stopped her, firmly instructing her to stay put. Linda's fury ignited. She pointed a shaking finger at us and shouted, "I knew something was going on between you two from the moment she set foot in this house." Linda was fully aware that she was no longer just my personal assistant. I couldn't help but smile at her audacity as she tried to accuse me of cheating, when she was doing exactly the same thing. I turned to Catherine and casually told her to leave us alone, motioning toward the home theater. As Catherine left, Linda struggled to follow me, carefully walking to avoid tripping. She finally stood beside me as I switched on the TV. A video started playing, and Linda watched, confused at first. But as she kept looking, it clicked. She realized what I had put on screen. The color drained from her face as she recognized the footage of her night with all the men. She stared at the screen in disbelief, her voice barely a whisper as she finally managed to ask, "Where did you get this?" I couldn't help but laugh at her question. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had the nerve to ask me where I got the footage, but she couldn't even attempt to defend herself. I leaned back casually and replied, "I recorded it myself." Her eyes widened in shock as she processed my response. She stammered, struggling to find words, but nothing came out. The room fell into an oppressive silence, the weight of her actions hanging heavily in the air. It was clear from the look on her face that she was caught, guilt and regret written all over her. I sat down on the couch, eager to watch the footage, my interest fully piqued. Linda remained standing, staring from the screen to me, unsure of whether I was angry or amused. I broke the silence by commenting on the video. "You know, I really liked what you did with that guy. It's a skill I never knew you had," I said, motioning for her to sit next to me. She hesitated, but had no choice. Slowly, she sat beside me, keeping her head down in shame. It was clear she knew at this point that she had messed up big time. As the footage played, I noticed the discomfort on her face. She wasn't watching the screen, but rather, she was glancing back and forth between the TV and me, clearly embarrassed by what she saw. I couldn't resist making another comment. "You know, this has been pretty entertaining. I never knew you had such close friends who were so comfortable around you." Linda remained silent for a while, her eyes never leaving the screen. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. I got carried away with all these men." She tried to explain herself, claiming that the men had challenged her to spend a night with them, and that she couldn't let them win. She said that's why she had gone to the party. I was impressed by how quickly she came up with this story, but I played along, letting her think I was buying it. I wanted to see how good she was at fabricating lies. "I understand," I said, nodding. "But if you were cornered by these men, you could have used the fact that you're my wife to get out of it." She responded quickly, saying, "I didn't want to ruin your reputation, so I didn't mention who I was." I was almost impressed by how smoothly she lied. The way she had crafted her response was almost flawless. I acted as though I felt sorry for her, playing the role of the concerned husband who believed her. As she thought she was off the hook, I made her walk with me to the dining table to get a glass of water. I sat her down and placed the glass in front of her. As she reached for it, her hand brushed against something underneath the glass. She looked down, and her face drained of color when she saw what it was. It was the same invite that she had hidden under the dresser. The glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. In that instant, she knew there was no point in lying anymore. I had everything. I had seen everything. She fell to the ground, breaking down in tears. There was nothing she could say to defend herself. The guilt was written all over her face. The tears didn't change anything. She was caught, and she knew it. "I know everything," I said coldly, watching her struggle for words. After a long silence, I spoke again. "You're out. There's no place for a cheater like you in my house or my life." She begged me to give her another chance, pleading that she wasn't thinking straight and had been swept up in the excitement. "They're all rich," she said. "I couldn't say no to them." I shook my head, resolute. "No, I've learned my lesson. I don't repeat mistakes." She tried to convince me, but my mind was made up. Forgiveness is not an option. Her pleas didn't move me. It was the hardest thing I had to do, but I knew it was necessary for my peace of mind and self-respect. As she left, I made a promise to myself that I would never let anyone into my life without fully testing their worthiness. That was the lesson I learned from Linda's betrayal. Within a week, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I made sure she would get nothing from me, given the chaos she had caused in my life. I had pictures and videos of her infidelity circulated in the media to shame her, making sure to destroy any credibility she had left. I did everything I could to make it difficult for her to find a job, warning major companies about her. I still had a private investigator keeping an eye on her to track her every move. I wanted her to feel the consequences of her actions, to make her regret every day she spent with me. I made sure she couldn't easily find a place to stay, and that she was humiliated everywhere she went. When she asked for alimony, I couldn't help but laugh at her blatant demands for money and property. She even went so far as to fake a pregnancy, hoping for child support and property under the child's name. I showed the judge all the pictures of her surrounded by men in compromising positions. I told him I had never been that intimate with her, and I demanded a DNA test to confirm whether the child was mine. It turned out she had lied about the pregnancy. I filed a defamation case alongside the divorce. She pleaded with the judge, claiming she had no money or income to pay me. Well, she should have thought about that before she decided to betray me. All this drama had unfolded in the 3 months since we got married. There were times I felt so depressed that I didn't want to do anything at all. But I carried on, determined to see it through to the end. Linda was the first person I thought would be different from all the other women I had encountered. At first, she didn't seem like a gold digger, but it turns out all she really wanted was my money and property. I now understand why she hesitated to share a room with me from the start. She wouldn't have been able to hide her deceitful actions if we had been living together. It's a painful realization, but I'm thankful I discovered her true intentions before things became even more complicated. I can now truly relate to the saying, love is blind. For me, it wasn't just blind. It was also untrustworthy. I know the road ahead will be tough. She didn't just destroy my marriage. She also tarnished my reputation. I can feel the judgment in the way people look at me as I pass by. Some of them pity me, while others seem to mock me for being fooled by a woman who was cheating right under my nose. It's disheartening to experience such scrutiny, and the weight of this betrayal is overwhelming. Navigating through the aftermath of this devastating revelation is more challenging than I ever imagined. After my divorce, a strange and unsettling series of events began to unfold. One by one, the 6 men Linda had been involved with mysteriously found themselves in violent encounters outside various clubs around the city. The first incident occurred late one night outside a popular downtown nightclub. A well-dressed man, known for his smooth charm, was found lying on the pavement, his groans of pain echoing in the quiet alley. Doctors later confirmed that he had suffered severe trauma to his testicles, ruptured beyond repair. Within a week, he disappeared, quietly leaving the city with no explanation. Then, just days later, another man, known to frequent a high-end club in the city's bustling district, was found in a similar condition, bruised, battered, and nursing an injury that left him unable to walk properly. The same pattern continued, with each lover suffering the same fate. They all shared one thing in common. Their testicles were ruptured beyond repair, and now their lives would never be the same. Word spread quickly, and the men who once flaunted their relationships with Linda were now living with the consequences of their actions. Each of them, too proud to admit the truth, quietly packed up and left the city for other places, far away from the prying eyes of anyone who might have suspected their involvement. No one spoke of what had happened to them, but the rumors were enough to keep them away for good. Some say the violence was a message, an unspoken warning to anyone who crossed a certain line, a line that Linda's lovers had unknowingly crossed. But in the end, all that remained was the mystery of their departure and the strange silence that followed their exit from the city. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.